Alright, are you recording? Right.
Do you want me sat? Am I in frame?
Alright, how important do you think special effects are to the making of a horror film?
I think they're very important because obviously special effects covers a wide range of different things. It's not just gore or gore, like special makeup. If you've got a zombie film or something, it can include things like floors creaking or like shaking or like a door falling off a hinge. It's that many different things. I think it's probably one of the most instrumental things in horror films, considering it's been there since essentially the very beginning. Even looking back to like 1920s silent films, they even had special effects in. Not obviously as much as modern ones, but they still had some.
Do you prefer practical effects or CGI?
I prefer practical because I feel it gives more of a raw feeling when you see it. And obviously it doesn't. You can sort of tell it's not exactly real, although sometimes it's hard to tell. But it just I respect it a lot more than CGI, because someone's had to craft it by hand. Someone's had to go in there and like match it to the skin just using makeup, and it's an age-old thing. I do still like CGI. I think it's very good, and I kind of like when they intertwine them together. I think that's when you get the best results. Is when, say, you use a base of practical effects and then further enhance it with CGI. I think that's the best way to get the results out of special effects in like horror films, especially.
Mm. So, can you name any films that you think have the best practical effects of horror films?
American Werewolf in London is a big one. Like that is a big one because so is the same with The Howling. Two very big like werewolf films, both sort of, because up until then audience have been used to a hand appearing in a window and suddenly hair appearing like in a transition, same with the face. But this one, it showed like skin stretching and like bones coming out of skin and hair growing. It was just very much more than anyone had ever seen. And then The Thing, obviously big like practical effects film, like it was like sort of critically review bombed because of the practical effects. We said, oh, this is way too gory, what the hell's happening here? This shouldn't be this gory. But that just goes to show how good the effects were, that people were complaining of how gory it was. A lot of Tom Savini films as well. Day of the Dead has some good effects in, especially like the stomach, whole thing, like the stomach ripping when the fella gets eaten by zombies. Friday the 13th, especially Part 4, which is also done by Tom Savini. Basically, any sort of horror films done by Stan Winston, Rick Baker, or Tom Savini, and also Rick Bottin, I would say, are sort of like the ones where you know you're in safe and like capable hand when those are handling the effects of the film.
You mentioned Tom Savini quite a lot there. Would you say that he's like the master of special effects in horror?
I'd say he's the master of gore effects. I wouldn't really say special effects, because I feel like when you look at, say, Rick Baker or Stan Winston, when they're making like The Alien for like Aliens or like The Alien Queen and stuff to do with Jurassic Park and like films that may not be horror films, but also just horror films in general, or the creature effects, I would say technically they are better than Tom Savini, but he is still very technical and very good at what he does. Like he has a certain rawness, because I know he served in Vietnam as a photographer. So he always said in interviews, if it didn't remind him of what he saw, it wasn't good enough. So is that element with him, you'll sort of be like, there's definitely some realism in this. And he knows, like, I think he even said he had a book of like autopsy pictures from like tons and tons of things. Because he had a page blocked out where it was like kids, because he never wants to do anything with like a kid dying. But like Tom Savini is definitely up there with like the horror greats. Like just in terms of gore effects, maybe not full-on special effects, but just gore effects and pure splatter. And even he is good at special effects, but I say gore seems to be his strong suit, and just understands it so well.
Do you excuse me, sorry. You've done practical effects before,
yeah,
haven't you? What practical effects have you done, and how would you rate them? Kind of at like a student level. Do you think that they would be like available for pretty much any student to try and attempt to do?
I mean, I think most practical effects boil down to the most basic form is available for anyone. Like a decapitation could be done with a mannequin head, spray painted like pink or something. Might not look as good, but you still get the effect. Because only I've done is a throat slit, which, although it was a bit complicated to set up, the actual elements of it and the actual terms of how it's done is relatively simple compared to other effects. Like, it doesn't take a lot. It's latex, a balloon, some form of like pump for the fake blood, and a hose, and essentially that's it. You're sorted there. Like, that's something you can get in a day going shopping. So like, but a lot of effects like that you could probably do. Like, you can, like, there's so many things you can do now that like anyone, and no matter what level, could easily have a crack at doing like a special effect, like an arm being taken off or just whatever. I know it's probably strayed a bit from your question, but
no, that's a perfect answer to my question. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So you mentioned doing a throat slit there. How would you? Could you specifically take us through how you did that throat slit?
So
how you filmed it?
First, what I started off with was essentially a plaster sort of mould for it, which was done by getting just like a sort of a big Pepsi bottle, putting clay around that in sort of a curve, then pouring plaster Paris in that till it's set. Right. So then you have essentially a curve which is about as wide as you want, like with sort of a neck, because most necks, largest size I'd say is like a 2 litre bottle. If you grab one of them, that's like fairly neck sized, if that makes sense. So you have that as a base, and then you do multiple layers of liquid latex on this plaster mould, going back and forth essentially in a circle, and with each layer you get slightly more in. So it's going to be thickest at the middle and sort of thinnest at the edges, and it depends how like thick you want it. Then you put a slit in this latex piece. So essentially, imagine my fingers are the latex piece. You would then say have a slit there. So like there's a little gap there. And underneath that, you would then have like a long balloon, or you could use a bit of like heat sink tubing, like with the end closed off, with a few holes in pointing outwards of that hole. Because it'll essentially be on the neck. You'll have latex on here, and the balloon on top of that with the holes cut into it pointing outwards. Then on top of that, you'll have the latex piece, which will then have the slit just above that hole. Right. And I can paint that slightly red in there if you want it, and then obviously match it with the skin on here and blend it in. And like latex and tissue paper will be a godsend for that, and foundation, that sort of. I didn't even use toilet paper because it basically helps blend it into the skin, but you can manage without. So yeah, once that's stuck down, you have the end of the balloon stuck out. That is then attached to a hose or like a tube, which is then, say you could, if you wanted them, say I did it with someone sat in a chair, you can do sort of any position. The hose then went down their back behind their shirt to sort of hide it, and then it was attached to a little garden pump, so you can sort of get the range. You can get, like, I had a tiny one, but you can get bigger ones, which are probably better. The hose was then attached to the little nozzle on that, and the fake blood was inside it. So then when I pumped, the fake blood would come out, and I got it to rest to about, say, where his shirt. If the hose went down the back of his shirt, the fake blood would be resting about there, so just sort of in the back of his shoulder. Then when it came to shoot, you pump as hard as you can, get the blood flowing, and then it should, if it's all set up correctly, come out the hose through the balloon, and then the holes you made in the balloon will spurt it out. Because it depends how much pressure you've got, because they're all activated on pressure, so probably more expensive ones will probably get a bit more pressure. And that will then burst out of the hole in the latex piece. So it'll be latex piece, balloon, blood coming out of the balloon through the latex piece, and then you have a slit throat effect essentially. It can go a lot more in depth than that, but that's sort of a basic explanation.
Well, I really appreciate doing this interview, Jonny, and the information that you give. Thank you very much for doing it.
You're welcome.
Anyway, that's it. Cut.